getting ready to mock up the fuse panel. So this is what I've done is I've ran the bolts through. As I mentioned, I drilled and then just tapped them through the sheet metal. Not real sturdy, you wouldn't want to use that tab as a nut, but to go the other way. But it works real good to hold the bolts into place and they're tight. And I've ran a washer and a nut on the back side of the firewall, and then the fuse panel will slide over this. They did mention that in the manual, that that's okay to do to make it easier to install, so we'll see if that helps or not. But my goal here is actually to space the fuse panel out away from the firewall more to get some more room, because of the way I'm running the wires through the firewall behind the fuse panel. Space is going to get real tight, so I'd like to gain a little bit of room there. So my thought in doing this is I was wanting the wires to run straight out of the fuse panel into the firewall, which doesn't work out the way wires run, but I got to thinking about it. It would actually be better to do it this way, to actually have some slack that comes out of the fuse panel and then a little bit of a loop to go back into the firewall. My thought being that I could take the fuse panel off to do something and not have to, make slack from the engine bay, because once all those wires are routed, you're not going to be able to pull them 6 inches to get, to pull it back into the engines or into the interior. So by doing it this way, it actually gives me some slack that if ever for some reason need to get behind the fuse panel to work on it, I'll make sure there's a loop here that hangs out of the way, of course, and secured, that would allow me to do that. So that's the plan. I don't know until I mock it up how it's going to work, but this is going to be awesome if it does work, because it's out of the way, uses the factory hole, it's up behind where there's nothing, but also still easy to get at. So and I only had to drill one hole that wasn't factory. This hole here is the factory hole that holds the grommet, and then I might find a little piece of rubber. Actually, now that I think about it, hot glue would work. Although I've ground this screw off that holds the other side of the grommet, I don't like that being there, just because I know wires are going to be routed around back there. So I've got some of that paint on electrical tape too, like you dip your pliers handles or something in, to give you a rubber coating. I might just paint some of that on there just to give me a little bit of a peace of mind that I'm not going to brush a piece of wire up against it and strip that out, or strip the wire rather. So I'll go find something for that now. I ended up using the Plasti Dip stuff on that screw head. That's what I had handy. I don't see why hot glue or something wouldn't work just as well. In fact, hot glue would probably work better. That stuff, you're trying to drip it onto a vertical surface like that don't really stay where you want it to. So it didn't come out real pretty, but ain't nobody gonna see it, and it suits its purpose. But hot glue, I think you could put it on thicker, have a little more control over it, that'd be fine too. So that should work, I think. So this looks like it's going to work out just perfect. So this is how much slack I've left in the truck with the fuse panel out, and I'll pop it up in there and I'll show you what it's like with it installed with having this much slack. So if a guy needs to work on it, I can pop it clear out, clear out here by the steering column. Plenty of room to work on it, so I'll shove it back up in there and show you. And here we are with it installed. I'm real tickled with this. It fits perfect right there. Clear up out of the way, but again, totally accessible using the factory stuff. And then the loop I was talking about, so it comes back down to about right here, but that's going to be super easy to cover. And these other wires, let me get back a little bit farther. So these other wires here are all for the dash and stuff. These wires here are really the only ones that are going back up into and outside. These are what are already in the loom. The rest of these are just going out, I think, and not doubling back. They just come out of the fuse panel, so these are all going to be routed somewhere anyway. So it won't be any problem bundling the wires up in here or whatever I decide to do. No matter what I do, they're going to be completely out of the way, because that fuse panel is mounted up so high. I'll have lots of room underneath of it that will still be obscure from view for the most part. Not that that's a big concern, but biggest concern is it doesn't, nowhere close to binding or getting hit with my foot and all that in the parking brake and whatever. So I'll show you what that looks like from the top here. So, and then the blinkers whatever those little bulb things are called. They go in the top there, and that make the turn signals work. And then you can see the hole there on top, which I'll have to figure out what a guy's supposed to do to plug that hole, because that's the grommet that comes with painless, the kit. So there's plenty of room to go through it, but I don't know how a guy's supposed to seal the extra area around that the wires don't occupy. So maybe there's some non-drying putty type stuff or something a guy could use that will clean that up and look okay. I don't know, we'll see. I'm not worried about that. So yeah, and there's lots of clearance here for my clutch switch. The vents completely out of the way, the ducting will be fine, the windshield wiper pivots, I said everything's, maybe this is where everybody mounts them. I don't know, I didn't do any research before I did this, so maybe I'm not reinventing the wheel here, but if you're looking for a place to mount that's a slick spot. So I'm real happy with that. I did a little mocking of the wiring, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop it back around the fuse panel on the outside, and then come back over the top and loop it right on top of this assembly here, which will give me a good place to come into the dash and go behind the dash and stuff. But in doing that, there's some edges on the park and brake assembly. They're not sharp, but they're still edges, and although I can tape up the wire and stuff, what I'm doing first is taking some vacuum tubing and weather stripping cement, and I've just secured this tubing on top of that metal piece on this side and then on the inside too. The inside's the first one I did, and I didn't really I just put cement inside the tube and then put it on there. I didn't want to hold, so I've put the clamp on there to hold that one down. But on this one, I coated the metal with this weather stripping and the tube per the instructions. You know, you're supposed to coat both surfaces and wait for their tacky, but that's why you read the instructions before you just go at it. But anyway, so I've done it on this one. That one's holding fine. We'll see if the other one does. If not, I'll redo it. I don't think they're just going to fall out of there anyway, but the wire's going to be pushing in on that. I don't know if it's even going to touch that outside piece, but it does touch this piece. Kind of sandwiches between the fuse panel and that bracket. So anyway, that just keeps it from chafing over time. A little extra protection. And then by doing this, I won't have to cut out so much wire. I always like leaving as much slack as I can in wire, as long as it's not impeding anything. That way, if I change something or want to, do something later, I've got plenty of slack to play with. So we'll give that a try. And I think the next step, I'll either try plastic wire loom if I have a good size to go around this before it goes in there, or otherwise I'll just use some 88 tape. If you do use electrical tape on any wiring, get the good stuff, that 88 tape, and there's another one, is it 33, I think. That stuff is most all other electrical tape pales in comparison. There's probably some good stuff out there you electricians know of or whatever, but 88 tape, it doesn't get hard when it gets cold, and it lasts forever. It's really high quality. It's not cheap, but it's good stuff. So I definitely recommend a high grade electrical tape for doing this kind of stuff, so it lasts forever, or a long time. While going through the interior side of this wiring, I came across another pair that I needed to route to the engine, and that is for the backup lights. This one has a switch located on the transmission. This kit assumes that your backup switch is in your steering column for an automatic or something. So I've ran those back out through the firewall so they can go along with the tail light section of wires along the frame. And then with my routing project here, I've separated the dimmer switch and the dome light, so they'll come out of this loom before it does its big before it goes wrapping up and around here. I'll separate them right here so they can go over to here into the pillar, or whatever you want to call that, behind the door jamb, and then dimmer switch there, and then the dome light can go up in through here. I think there's factors already the radio wiring or the existing dome light or wiring or something, I think, is already up in there, so I'll be able to use that as a pole wire when I when I get to that part, that's really low priority. I'll probably just coil the dome light wire and just let it hang in there for a long time before I mess with that. But dimmer switch I'll need to get done while I do the interior, otherwise the headlights won't work very well. Here's how I'm looking with the wire loom installed. So again, going down, around, and then come back out on this, and then I've got lots of slack to do whatever I want here. Probably secure that on top once I get that everything wired. So my goal too is to wire enough slack that I can take the whole dash panel out and kind of, you know, pull it out and be able to work in here, you know, when I do my air conditioning or whatever projects later on. That I thought about putting in a connector so that I could actually disconnect the whole dash harness wire and remove it, but I don't know if I'll do that. I hate adding any more connectors than you need, because then you just end up having gremlins maybe later on, especially if you can't get a good connector. Anyway, so some of this is going to go to my steering column pin out here, which the kit comes with this thing that goes with the painless wire loom that will then plug into that when it's wired. But this will probably just snake up in here and just connect right on top of the steering column, or the pedal assembly. I'll just make sure when I route this that it doesn't interfere with any of the clutch pedals, brake pedals, you know, all the actuators and stuff. So which that looks like it should be fine. This wire loom looks good. I'll show you from the bottom here, maybe. It just goes up and around, and I haven't cut any wires or anything yet. And you know, overall I don't have a ton of extra length, so this is just perfect. I think you know, I should be able to secure everything up and probably not have to cut off much wires. Maybe some of these, I'm not sure what their switches or what they're for, but and then the power, the dimmer switch and the dome light, they're in this wire loom. Oops, sorry, this wire loom here. So you can see where, I'll try to show you here. There, I split it off from the big loom right there, and it goes just. I need to secure it. Let me show you from here. Sorry, I'm trying to make you dizzy. I'll figure out a way to secure that. There's some holes there that I can, you know, I don't want it anywhere near the brake assembly, but there's plenty of room there to secure it to something, and that should be fine. So we'll keep on trucking here, but I'm really liking this. This looks, it's up out of the way, plenty of slack if I need to move or change things. I like this plastic loom just because it allows the wires to slip a little bit inside. So one thing that I learned in the past is if you zip tie all your wires together in a straight line, when you go to bend it around stuff, it kinks the wires up potentially, because the way the slack changes as you bend wires. So these are nice, so you don't have to have everything zip tied together inside when you have it inside here, so it keeps all the wires together, but also gives you a little bit of slack to move and adjust and not bind things up. So this down here doesn't look pretty yet. Not that it has to look pretty, but I'll probably take another piece of loom and cover that other chunk out and just, you know, 88 tape or 33 tape or whatever around the open spots. It doesn't have to be covered anyway. Most factory stuff is, there's lots of bare wires in it, so I'm not too concerned with that. As long as it's not hanging down by my feet, that's all I really care. Something else to add, if I don't want to solder a connection, I really like these crimp-on connectors with the shrink tube. And when you shrink these, it actually has some kind of gluey type stuff that oozes out, that glues the wire pretty much into the heat shrink, or into this insulation. 3M has these. I don't know if these are 3M or just generic. I got off of eBay, but I've got them in multiple sizes, and these are really nice. They protect the crimp connection from moisture and whatever, because of the way that it seals it when you heat it up with a heat gun or a lighter or whatever you got. So I really recommend something like this. You can buy them in bulk off eBay, like I said, or wherever, I'm sure has them, but they're normally known as like 3M, I think, shrink tube connectors or something. I can probably find the link or something, but if you get to look at them, I'm sure you can find them. The other thing that I've been doing is getting this shrink tube in bulk, I don't do a lot of electrical stuff, but a spool like this will probably last me a lifetime. It's not that expensive. 3/16 seems to be the best size for me for automotive wiring. It covers a lot of these, the typical gauges you run into, and it shrinks quite a lot. So you can have a small wire up to but you can just barely get it on. The biggest thing is don't forget to put it on before you put the connector on. Otherwise, chances are you can't slide it over the connector to get it back on the wire. So put you in kind of a pickle there. So, but this is nice to have. I've got a few different sizes, but this is the size that the 3/16 is what I use the most. Got my ignition switch all wired up. And what I've done, and I might have to come back and correct it, I'm not sure, is I've done everything per the painless instructions, except for the coil wire. Sorry, I'm having problems getting this to focus. Except for the coil wire, which is I think it's the pink one. It says in the painless wiring that's supposed to have power in start and run, but I don't have a coil. Well, I have a coil, but I'm using the 5.0 ignition. But what I do know I need is power just when it's in start to the TFI. So I've got a start wire here going to, which the center pole start only has power when in the start position, all the way cranked over. One goes to the solenoid that actuates, tells the starter solenoid to go, and then this one's going to go to the TFI that only, from what I read or learned, is it only has power in the start position. So I'm going to use that coil wire for that. Maybe I'll know more as I get to the engine side if that was correct. And I made a note, so I might have to come back for that. But that looks good. I did buy a new ignition switch, this side of it, and then I put my original tumbler and collar and stuff on this one. You've just got to turn the ignition key on and push this little pin down, and then after the collar and the spring are off, and the little nut. You take this nut off, and then it comes out of the dash, and then you push this down and twist it, and that pops off, and then the spring comes off. So when all these three pieces are off, you just have the tumbler and the key's not in it, but the tumbler and the ignition switch. So then you put the key back in it, turn it into on position. At least that's what I had to do to get it out. I don't know if that's really necessary, but then you push this little pin in, and then that allows you to take the original cylinder lock out, and then I can move it over to this new ignition switch, because I mean it's a, I'm sure it was the original switch. I figured that's good insurance to have a new switch on there. And I got a new headlight switch. The one thing I think I didn't buy yet is the wiper switch, just because I don't know, I just wasn't worried about. Maybe my other one's fine, but I might not be able to get that wired up right away until I get a new one. I'll have to look and see what I got going on there once I get to that point. But so yeah, so making some progress here. Got the headlight switch wired up. Ended up using the crimp-on terminals that came from Painless because they're insulated like that. I tried to find some shrink tubing that I could use with these connectors, but I couldn't find one that would shrink that side and that side. I didn't want to use two different sizes, and so I went ahead and put the electrolysis or the dielectric grease in these, and then in there as well, so it'll stay clean. So these should be fine. And then that one I was able to, that's a bolt terminal, so I used the regular solder on there, but not my preferred method, but it'll be fine. So I think the other way is probably overkill anyway. So I'll get this put in the dash. So my wiring length's a little, or about right on, maybe a hair short with the way I'm doing it. My ignition switch ended up being long, so I'll probably end up with a loop tied up under here somewhere. I think these will just barely reach with the way I'm running the wires, and then the rest of the stuff should be fine, I think. But coming along here. So I wasn't able to get this switch all the way in the first time, so I just wanted to point out that I'm needing to grind this little point down here. The switch that I took out, it doesn't stick out very far, and this one was out about right there. I don't know, it was about twice that length, before I ground it down. So FYI, if you can't get your your nut tight on your headlight, that might be sticking out too far and it's screwing it up. I'm getting the steering column connectors installed now, these little guys. So these guys are the ones I was talking about earlier where you got the double crimp. I think this is what you'll mostly find in high quality, you know, wiring these days, automotive and aircraft, or you know, something similar to this. But what I'll say is this is a real pain in the butt. You can see this one's not done very good. I got a couple that were real nice, but these are a pain, but I think I'm struggling because of the pliers that I'm using. I've got these Mallory set, and I would say these particular ones that I have in my hand are garbage. Maybe the other ones aren't bad. I had to grind all this area down to even get the jaws to close up here, and then I had to file inside these twin locks where the crimp goes in and turns around backwards. They weren't done very well. So I think my biggest struggle are these. I think if a guy had a good pair of pliers, and next time I will, I'll order a pair. There's no way this can be this difficult. I had to bend all these little, let me get one here, these little tabs I had to get set just right. Not this front one. I've got the first one that you crimp right here in the middle. Sorry, I heard the point. Let me use my needle noses. So this one right there is easy to do with these crimpers that I have. These work real nice. I don't even know what brand they are, but these are good ones. But the second one that goes on the insulation, the crimp here in the back, that one's the one that's hard to do. You got to have the little, and it shows just in the manual. I'm kind of being redundant, but these twin locks there's several different terms for that, I think. So these pliers have two different ones for that, but both of them aren't very good. I was starting to learn to start it here and then finish on the smaller one, and that was giving me decent results. But overall, I'm struggling with this, and I think it's mostly just the pliers. But I got some of these that look correct, but some of them aren't. But they should be fine. This other crimp's a good crimp. But and I also mentioned that I didn't have any of the other style slide-on crimps, or the spade connectors, but I just realized that Painless actually gives a bunch of these in the kit, so I probably should have been using these on that headlight terminal. But the ones that are in, those are fine. I've had good luck with those insulated type too, but I could have probably put these on and then slid. Well, maybe I would have still had the problem with getting the insulation on, actually, so I take that back. But the kit does include these. These are nicer connectors, the fact that they pinch onto the insulation, assuming you have a good pair of pliers to use them. I apparently don't, so I'll save those for another project. But now I'll get these plugged into that plastic connector that then plugs into that one down there. Here's what I come up with for my gauge wiring. Nothing special. The main thing I'm doing here is kind of daisy chaining the common wires. So got a ground that goes to that ground, and then it goes to this one. This will be my junction for grounds. It's just my volt gauge. This is, I think, fuel and water temperature, whatever, but basically the same. You got same wiring. So anyway, I ran my ground from one gauge to the next gauge to that gauge, and then from there, with that bolt post, that one will go to where the gauge mounts on the dash. So that way you're not running home runs to every source, basically. Same thing I did with the ignition hot. So I got this one jumping to that one, that jumps to this one, and then from here I'll feed another wire that actually feeds from the ignition to there. And then on the dash lights, I just ran all these together, and then the dash light feed will run into there. And then these two posts here for the sender, so those will be individual home run wires. I do have 2 volt gauges with the way I'm setting this up. I've got this one, and then there's one in the dash. I bought a new gauge for that, which it's redundant, but this is more just a space filler. And then if there's later on there's another kind of temperature gauge or some other gauge I want to use, I can use this hole for that, because that'll be that won't really be needed, but look better than not having a gauge in the cluster. So and then so once this is done, and then I've also I'll get that plugged into the dash, and then or wired in under here. It's going to go there, and then I've got all new plugs in the whole dash, which these two down here aren't going to be used because that's that battery light and the oil light, or vice versa. So I'll just leave those going nowhere for now. I just wanted to make sure I plug the holes, that way I'm not getting dirt in there. And then there's just two dash lights that lights up the whole cluster, and then turn signal lights, and then a high beam indicator there, and then I'll have to do these wires as well. So I'll probably do the same idea of combining them, though these are all grounded through the dash, so I only need the hot wires to those. Looks like the gauges do need grounds, but I might just loop them back into their own nuts, or the securing screws there. I'll see, or I might just run a dedicated ground. I don't know. What I might do actually is do both. Run the ground to this, but then also another ground that goes to a, I don't know, better spot. Just, you know, the ground's part of your circuit, so you just got to make sure it's good. Although this whole cluster is screwed to a metal dash, so there should be plenty of ground, but doesn't hurt to do a little extra. And I also got the cigarette lighter ready. I took it out and cleaned it out. It still has the little factory, let's see if I can zoom in on that. There's actually a little bulb in this little fitting. That's must be the original one. And then I put a new wire that feeds the light ignition, or the, no, sorry, not ignition, but the cigarette lighter accessory port, whatever you want to call it. And then this wire here is just for that light. So basically when the dash lights are on and you pull your cigarette lighter out, this little thing inside there will illuminate. Not really needed. But I'm actually surprised they put that in there from the factory back in the 50s. I wouldn't think that'd really be a concern in a pickup truck, but this is a custom cab, so maybe that was some minor detail of that. I don't know, maybe they all had it, I don't know. Anyway, so that stuff's ready. I'll probably have to maybe extend some wires to get to these gauges. I don't know if I can pull them out of the loom and get enough slack for my the voltmeter, the gas sender, and the oil sender, but I don't mind extending those if I have to, so making some headway still. Something I want to share that I'm going to be using for the first time. I saw these on Roadkill, the show on Motor Trend. These are magnetic, and they're for attaching zip ties or whatever to, and the pull on these is just ridiculous for as small as they are. I can get it off there, but it takes a lot of work. So my thought is these are going to be real handy for attaching wires up under the dash and stuff, you know, if I want to run them across the top or towards the back, you know, where I don't want to drill screws. They're not going to be as good as screws, but they're can't get that to focus here. They're super strong, so I figured for under the dash, and then maybe running the headlight wiring along the inner fender, till at least until I get things permanent, I can use these. So I'm going to use them to attach this wire loom to that bracket there, and then maybe even use another one to hold these up underneath the dash. I've got everything pretty much wired. I've got to terminate the senders, what would be the battery, the volt gauge in the dash, and then the oil pressure sender wires, and then a power source to the gauges. So I went ahead and just grounded each gauge to the cluster. So this cluster should have a good ground. I mean, it bolts in, screws into the dash with metal screws and everything, so I think that'll be fine. These all ground the same way anyway, the lights. So I've got these all wired and ready to go. I found a red cover that's made for these lights for my high beam indicator, and then the rest are just regular bulbs. I got all these new connectors from mid-50s. They were cheaper than like Amazon and stuff when you find these little one wire push-in connectors. Since I was ordering other stuff, I ordered some from there, and they're said affordable, and they all fit in these dash. So you need quite a few of them. What was it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? just for the dash cluster. So if you do order some, you need at least that many, and then if you have some other gauges or something that might need them. But these I don't really need, like I think I mentioned earlier. I'm not using those right now, but I might later on. Never know. Main thing is to plug the hole. So yeah, so I just want to show these things. I got them, I think, off of Amazon, Jartley, whatever that is. So magnetic cable tie holders. There's various sizes and strengths, so they're rare earth magnets, whatever they call them. But so still plugging away, getting pretty close, I think, to getting be able to put the dash in. So that'll be nice. I'm not doing the wiper switch or the heater switch now. I'll come back and do that. There's a power feed for the wiper, and power feed looked like for the AC or the heater switch. There's AC wires here, so but I'm not going to really worry about wipers or heater right now, so that'll be another step later on. Okay, so I think I'm about ready to get the dash in, so you can kind of see what I've done here. It's I don't know, it's not real clean, but I did paint and mark the left and right turn bulbs. Because my thought was, if I ever need to take this out, I really just need to pull plugs. You know, it pops out in 2 seconds, other than maybe the speedometer cable. But so what I'm planning on, I was going to put a magnet like up in here to hold these wires, but I think what I'll do is, as I bring the dash into place, I'll take these wires and put it here in this factory hook that's on the top of the speedometer. So that's how. So my thought is that way, if I ever want to take this out again, which I will, because it makes it a lot easier to work under here, these will easily unhook from this and just hang here. But while it's in, it should keep these all out of the way. This is the steering column connector here, so I just loop that slack around, zip tied it, so it's all, I'm sorry, this is kind of hard to see, but or even follow what I'm doing here. But so I've got a magnet under this point right here for keeping that. I mean, that's stiff, that's pretty good. And then I got another one on the firewall there holding the mostly to keep that from wanting to kind of bound up and come up to that. So I think that'll be fine. And then of course the wires are already feeding to the switches. Those will be fine. So I think this is good. I got a bunch of wires here. I just taped them up. They are the AC, wiper, radio, stuff like that. So I still got some unused. And there's an extra headlight power that's not used with this type of switch. So I've got some extra stuff there for later. Just wadded up. Since when the wires are cut off flush, I always like to put tape on the end, just so because those wires could push, you know, an end of a wire like this could push up against something, you know, and cause an arc. So I always tape over the ends, just for peace of mind. So so we'll see if I can get her wrestled in there. Here's a little tip you might find handy. I've got one dash screw hole that's a little bit stripped out, so I'm just going to add a zip tie in there in the hole, and as it goes in, that zip tie will help tighten that loose hole up. All these other ones are fine. I did order new stainless screws while I was getting stuff from mid-50s. Yeah, maybe this is just for 56. I don't know if they work for other years. But the other thing I did order, there's a rubber kind of a seal, I guess you could say, that goes around the top of this, and that was back ordered, so I'll have to put that on later. But this'll do for now. So anyway, that's a nice little trick that works if you got a hole that been walled out a little bit. Alrighty, got the dash back in. So what I had to do when I was talking about the hook on the top of this on the inside and hooking those wires, it really didn't work to do that while I put the dash in. They were a little too tight, but once I got the dash in, I was able to reach up from behind and get those wires hooked back in there. So I'll just have to remember when I want to take this dash out, then to reach up there and unhook those, and then the dash will come right out. So now I am on to the dimmer switch. So I got those penetrating with oil. These unscrew, let me set my light here so I can show you. The 4 screws on the outside, they go through the body, so that if you look on the other side of the truck, you see the screw heads coming out. So I went ahead and lubricated those with PB Blaster, and really all of them came out except for one. And that one I just took and just grinded a I'm sure you guys have seen that trick before. If you got a Phillips head or something that's crappy. Jeez, can I get that to focus? There you go. You just take a grinder and cut a slit in it, and then you can get a flat head on it. Usually get them out that way. So I don't know if I ordered new ones for that, but I might have. I'll have to look. But I ordered a new dimmer switch, and then all the wiring will be new. I got all that wiring fed down here. So I was surprised how much debris collects in here. That's quite a bowl to fit this dimmer switch light, and I would have never really thought to clean that out. Guy actually would want to do that once in a blue moon, because I can't imagine that, I'm surprised that I don't have rust there. Although we live in a pretty dry climate, that's a really good place to collect moisture and debris and stuff. So I'll get that cleaned out and get the switch replaced. And just so you have the part number, again, this is another mid-50 part, 2914 dimmer switch. So I'm not sure if that's it. No, it says 48 through 1960, so this covers most of those years. So looks like a direct swap, screw on terminals, 3 wires, so should be identical to the one I'm taking out.